went out to New York to attend the Ad Age Digital Conference. If you haven't heard of Ad Age, it's a compilation from the folks in Madison Avenue and kind of creative advertising smarts, and a mashup of some of the best brains in Silicon Valley with leading technology companies out there, as well as a good mix of cutting-edge startups. Just to start with, here's a list of some of the notable companies that were at the conference. Why we thought it was so worth attending is really most of the companies you see here send some of their senior level executives. So probably about VP level on up are here. And really what you're getting is kind of an inside look and a download of what their last year has been like, what they've faced in terms of challenges, and then some insider perspective on what's coming up in the coming year, as well as a longer term outlook in terms of what the technological future looks like and how does that mash with advertising, and especially digital advertising. It's really tough to summarize all the stuff that was covered in that conference. It was over 2 days because there's so much going on in digital right now. I just wanted to hit a couple of things that stood out, and then we're going to narrow in on just a couple. So I drew this as the big data monster, but big data in general, the emergence of having data from so many different multiple points within an organization as everything shifts to digital. What are companies doing? How do you make that data meaningful? And how do you automate knowing that you have all these insights? Big challenge. Hookups happening in the marketing automation and CRM space, so changing the way sales and marketing interact, leaning a lot more on technology to serve up custom content across the web. How is that impacting things for organizations? New ad formats, so I'm sure we've seen a lot of these trickle out this year. Sponsored Stories is a good example from Google. A lot more examples that we hit on during the conference. The changing role of social networks, that's the Snapchat logo, which I wasn't that in tune with like the youngsters these days. But constantly changing space, right? How do you keep up? How do you stay in tune with what's changing there? Mobile usage overtaking PC, so a huge theme, right? How do you adjust your marketing knowing that people want a seamless experience across all these devices? How do you serve that up and fine-tune and customize based on where people are looking at things? And then continuing to see huge updates roll out from some of the giants like Google. Not provided keywords being one of the major ones that rolled out this year that's impacting a lot of insights marketers have. So where do we find that line between privacy and data? So what I wanted to do in the kind of 8 minutes I have left is tell 2 stories that wrap up to this overall theme that was distilled out of the conference, which is really marketing technology is moving much, much faster than organizations. And when we look at the list of companies that was there, I want to just tell 2 stories from 2 internet giants, and that's Facebook and Google. So we'll start with Facebook. So this was a cover that came out in 2012, Fortune magazine. It's a little bit hard to see, but Mark Zuckerberg kind of on the left there. It's one of the biggest mistakes we've ever made. So Facebook's head of consumer marketing was there, and she was recounting what that mistake looked like. And if you flash back to 2010 and try to picture in your mind what things were like as Facebook, so picture the graffiti on the walls like you see in Social Network, the movie. Picture all the, just out of college engineers running around with their headphones on, coding away. Somewhere in the back of Facebook, a lone developer sat there who was the only developer in the whole organization dedicated to iOS. They had one person out of that entire organization dedicated to developing apps for Apple's platform. And the reason why they only had one is Facebook hedged all their bets and tried to sidestep having to develop an app for Nokia, BlackBerry, Android, iOS, and Microsoft, and said, we're going to build hybrid HTML5 apps. And so they really didn't see iOS as a priority. As 2010 went on and it became pretty clear that Android and iOS were the 2 dominant players in the market, Facebook realized they made a huge mistake. And so the head of consumer marketing was really there representing one of the biggest technology companies, asking the question, what happens when you get the technology wrong? And as companies, that's really easy to fall into, especially as you're trying to stay on the cutting edge of what's happening. And really for Facebook, what it meant was going back to ground zero. So they made a conscious decision to start from scratch with developing brand new apps for iOS and Android. They shifted their whole organization around making that happen. So they hired talent in Silicon Valley for mobile, and they acquired companies that had those capabilities. They embedded a mobile engineer in any project that was happening across the whole company. And they rolled out an internal training process for mobile so that even if you weren't an engineer within Facebook, you were getting a mobile perspective on any project that was happening. So they really tried to make it central to the organization. In their major all-hands meeting in 2011, Mark Zuckerberg pointed to mobile as the defining element that would make or break Facebook's future. Efforts that they put in paid off. Their iOS update in August of 2012 received the highest rating any Facebook app has received in the iTunes store. And then their real flagship unveiling, which happened right before the conference I was at, was the Facebook Home feature that operated off the Android platform. And why this was so critical for Facebook, even though it wasn't a blockbuster in terms of adoption, is it really reimagined the way you can develop an app to operate with an iOS. So Facebook Home, if you're not familiar with it, takes over your phone so that Facebook is front and center. So you can you can see your news feed right on your home screen. You can use Facebook Chat to interact with your friends. And it puts Facebook central to your phone before any of your other apps. So it's really the answer to their rumored Facebook phone was a development around the Android platform. And I think what we're starting to see today is a lot of the features of this are trickling into the standard Facebook app we see across different devices. So I really like the Facebook story and kind of going through some of the trials and tribulations because I think it poses a lot of interesting questions for people in the audience out here tonight. Facebook is one of the leading technological companies, and they got the technology wrong. For us who aren't on the cutting edge of technology, what does that look like in your world? You might be locked into a CMS that's archaic and is barring you from moving in the direction you want to move. You might be wondering, how do I get into mobile, and are tiptoeing that issue instead of jumping right in. You might have bought a marketing automation platform and are using 10% of it and still trying to navigate the waters of how to use the rest of it. You might have developed a mobile app and are looking to reimagine it much like Facebook did. So I think the key learning and takeaway from the Facebook presentation was really, it's never too late to reimagine the future. If you picture that one engineer in the Facebook headquarters dedicated to iOS, and knowing that now Facebook is the most downloaded and most used app within the iTunes store, that's quite a turnaround within 3 years from one of the world's leading technology companies. The second story I wanted to tell is about Google. This is just a quick screenshot of the products that Google offers. I did a quick count on their site. It's a little over 40, so they're one of the most product-diverse technology companies out there, as we all know. And Google's chief creative officer came and spoke. And what was really interesting in hearing from him is they were talking about how to market Google as a whole. And the quote from him and the answer that he, in working with the engineering teams as they try to market Google's products, really was, how do we get out of the way of the product and how do we tell the human story? When you think of Google's products, they're so technologically advanced and moving so quickly in line with that theme that I pointed out. And so I just wanted to point out a couple key examples of how Google is doing that and then ask a couple questions related to that.
Google, what is glossophobia?
Glossophobia, or speech anxiety, is the fear of public speaking.
Resolutely faithful to it.
This is preeminently the time to speak the truth frankly and boldly. This is no unsolvable problem if we face it wisely and courageously. let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Cool, so great commercial, right? And notice how many Google products it integrates into that commercial, but it doesn't feature the products. It's really telling a human story that the products connect. Here's just a sampling of some of the other ones that was showcased at the conference. These slides will be available for you to reference, and I'm sure you've seen some of those. Probably a lot of you have seen that Nexus 7 one ad. And I think the real question that the Google story poses, especially if you work in an industry that has a ton of competition and it's really hard to differentiate yourself, or you work in the B2B space and it can oftentimes seem like the human connection isn't as tangible as working in the business-to-consumer space, is how do you tell that human story to what your product or service delivers rather than telling the product or benefit story? If you re-envision the product or service that you represent through those lenses, how would that change actually how you market it? He closed with a quote that I think was really cool and I think really helps pose that question. And that was, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's really true. In fact, I bet if there's one thing you'll remember from my presentation, it's probably that video because it had the most emotion in it of anything. And so if I try and narrow down the learnings from the conference, and there were so many companies there, I know I was only able to tell you 2 stories here tonight about what I learned, but if you look at Facebook, a company that kind of missed the mark with mobile early on, and then in terms of the technology, and then really turned it around and delivered one of the most cutting-edge apps that's been seen. And if you look at Google, which is one of the most product-diverse companies out there, and you look at how do they market themselves well, I think what you tend to see, even in light of technology moving so fast and organizations struggling to keep up, is that digital is still about people first and technology second. So, thank you.